Hi folks, I'm going to try and make this a quick one. I want to do a response to a tag created by Alex and his channel Motric 24/7. If you don't know Alex's channel and your tastes extend to the experimental, the avant-garde, the downright weird, check him out. It's a superb channel. Lots of great stuff shown, most of which I've never ever heard of. Anyway, he set up a tag of 8 questions, all relating to experimental music. So I thought I'd give it a go. So, first question is to show an album of improvisational music. So I thought I'd show this album by Gruppo di Improvisazione Nuova Consonanza. They were a collective of 8 members, all composers in their own right, who were formed in 1963 in Rome. The major name here that everybody will recognize is Ennio Morricone was a member. Now, this is a difficult listen, one of those sort of avant-garde albums where there's very little, it seems, adherence to common musical forms. There's 8 of in the group, but each track uses different combinations of those 8 from 2 members to the full band. Like I said, this was their first album released in '66. I understand the ones to look out for are the albums in the early '70s, where they actually added a touch of krautrock and a little bit of groove into these improvisations. Not an easy album, not one I would listen to every day. Got to be really in the mood, but good one. Question 2 was show an album utilizing the Moog synthesizer. Now, I know I'm not saying that right, but it's the way I've always pronounced it before I heard that it's supposed to be Moog. So I'll keep on saying Moogs if you don't mind. And I'll show this. This is the great Popol Vuh with their first album, Affenstunde. Popol Vuh obviously were the brainchild of Florian Fricker. And on here, it's all synthesizer music produced on the Moog synthesizer, this one here, with just a little bit of percussion. Like I said, this was their first album released in 1970. They did one more album in this sort of ambient electronic vein, and then he took the band in a different direction. In 1975, he sold this Moog to Klaus Schulze, who went on to use it to great effect on his albums. So that's Popol Vuh with the Moog. Question 3 was to show an album with field recordings. So for this, I've gone with this album by Cohen Holtkamp, and the album is Field Rituals. Nothing to see on the back there. Cohen Holtkamp was half of the ambient duo Mountains, great duo. And this is his first solo album, where it's pretty much in the same sort of style as Mountains, very ambient pieces, beautiful pieces, but all underscored by environmental field recordings. Some beautiful stuff on here. Well worth your time if you like ambient music. Next up, an album that includes or involves drones. And I've gone with this album by Lamont Young, Dream House, 78 minutes 17 seconds. Lamont Young was one of the early instigators of minimalism music, I understand. And this album, particularly, it seems to me to be the ultimate minimalist album, the ultimate drone album. It is just basically Lamont Young on voice and sine wave oscillator, along with his wife on voice. There's a little bit of trumpet and trombone, the trumpet being played by John Hassel. But in this, very little happens over the course of this album, or it seems to be the case. But it's totally captivating. When I first put this on and listened to it, when it had finished, just the silence seemed wrong. Something was missing. It had totally messed with my head, and I was expecting this just to continue on. It's superb stuff. Again, got to be in the mood to listen to it. Got to have the time to listen to it. And for anybody that says albums have got to be less than 20 odd minutes per side, this each side is nearly 40 minutes long. That's my drone album. Next up, an album with spoken word. Well, my other love or passion, apart from music, is literature and reading. And I'm very much in the a fan of genre type of literature. So horror was my first love, and one of my first loves in the horror genre was the great H.P. Lovecraft. So I've got to show a couple of albums here. This is Tales of H.P. Lovecraft by the Duke Street Workshop, and this is two of his short stories, From Beyond and The Hound, read by Lawrence Harvey, with music composed by Lee Cullen. Brilliant stuff. I've got comes in this nice sort of maroon vinyl, and if you want the liner notes, see if you can read that. And in I'll just show one more in a similar vein. And this album, oh, it's a beast. This is Lovecraft's The Shadow over Innsmouth, read by Andrew Lehman and scored by Chris Fazzone. This is on the superb Cadabra label, who do sort of specialise in spoken word albums and do a lot of Lovecraft stories. There's the man himself. So if you like audiobooks, you probably like these. The music's actually really good, and they even do some albums where they just extract the music out on its own. But well worth checking out Cadabra Records and their series of albums. Number 6 was to show an album with processed instruments or voice. So I've got a couple here to show. And the first is Charles Wuorinen. I can't pronounce it, sorry. And his album Times Encomium. Charles was a 20th century composer of classical music, and this is his only electronic music album. This was core recorded on the RCA synthesized. What am I having trouble with me mouth? It's synth. And he then took those recordings into the studio and applied a lot of processing to them. This won the 1970 Pulitzer Prize for Music. And I think he later rescored it for orchestra, which would be interesting to hear and compare with this. But in terms of processed voice, I've decided I'll show this album by Claire Hamill, the album's Voices. Now, Claire was a singer-songwriter back in the 70s. She signed to Ray Davies's Conch label and did albums for them. She even worked with Steve Howe of Yes fame, and with Wishbone Ash. She appeared on 2 or 3 of their albums and even joined them for a tour back in sort of early 80s. But during the 80s, she reinvented herself as a new wave artist, and she produced this album, Voices, where all the sounds on the album originate from the human voice, processed in different ways. A really interesting album. Next, number 7, was to show an album by an artist from the Nurse with Wound list. Now, if you're not aware, Nurse with Wound are a British avant-garde experimental group led by Steve Stapleton. And on their I think it was in their first album, they included a sheet listing all the artists that had influenced them, or they, regarded very highly. It was quite an extensive list, and that list itself has become influential in people wanting to explore experimental music. So I'm going to show just a quick 2 that I've shown before, and this is, take it out of its sleeve so you can see. Finders Keepers are doing a series called Strain, Crack and Break, Music from the Nurse with Wound list. Now this is volume 1, and includes some of the French artists that were on that list. People like Zedana, Lard Free, Etron Foulalou Blanc, Pierre Henry, etc. And they've done a second volume with artists from Germany. And this includes people like Wolfgang Downer, Ex Magma, Tomorrow's Gift, Out of Focus, Thirsty Moon, Brain Ticket. Really good comps. But for a single artist that was on the list, I'm going to show Ron Geesin and his album Expo Zoom. Now, Ron Geesin, most of you will know through his involvement with Pink Floyd and his work on the title track of the Atom Heart Mother album. He also did a soundtrack album with Roger Waters called The Body. But he's a well-known avant-garde artist in his own right. This is an album that was recorded for the Expo in 1970 in Tokyo, but was just released back in 2019 on the Italian Dark Companion label. Oh. Be careful how this one opens out. Oh, that goes up that way. This is awkward. Comes on purple vinyl. I knew this would happen. And there's the man himself. This is a really interesting album of sort of electronics, quite abrasive in places. It was meant to accompany, in sort of like an infant loop, 19 and 90-second videos at the expo. But I recommend this. And finally, the bonus question was to show an album that employed toy instruments. Struggled with this one a little bit, but came across this. This is the great Henry Cow with their album Legend from 1973. Henry Cow was one of the originators of the RIO, Rock in Opposition movement. Brilliant band. But on here, and I think on most of their albums, their drummer Chris Cutler, along with these barrage of percussion instruments, is credited with playing toys. So that's my one for this question. So that's it. Thank you, Alex. That's a really interesting tag, one that gave me a chance to show albums that maybe I wouldn't have shown otherwise. So hope you're all doing well. Weather's been brilliant today here in Cumbria. Took a trip out, not to Record Store Day. We don't have record shops here, but I went and did a bit of book hunting. Came back with a nice book haul. So take care, everybody. All the best. Cheers.